Hey folks, in this video we are going to be learning how to move the contents of one Google Drive folder to another. This is a follow-up video in my Google Drive series that focuses on using Google Apps Script to automate the movement of files. So in the last video we learned how to create a manual array of files so that we could automate their movement into a destination folder. So what we're going to do today is we're going to move the contents of that destination folder into another file. So what you're going to need is a Google Drive folder with files in it, and then we're going to want to create another destination for where those files will go. So once you have your materials together, we can begin. I'm going to start by creating a new folder that I am going to call destination number 2 because the last file was called destination. I am going to go up to the new section of Drive, then scroll down to more, and then open up a new AppScript file. As we've talked about in some of the other videos, you can use a bound app script that exists within another file, such as docs, sheets, or slides. I'm going to be using an unbound script. You can use whatever you want to. I'm going to title my project moving one folder to another. And I'm going to clear out the boilerplate. You don't have to. I'm going to create a function called main. It's going to have empty parentheses because we're not going to be passing any arguments to this function. It's merely for our ability to compile the code. I'm going to begin by identifying the folder where we want to move our files. I'm going to declare a variable that is called destination folder. And I'm going to set that to driveapp.getFolder by ID. And we are going to pass a folder ID into this method. So we're going to go back to our new destination folder. This is the place that we want to send our files. We're going to go up into the URL. We're going to copy the ID, and we're going to paste it in between our quotes. You can use single quotes or you can use double quotes. It doesn't matter. My preference is typically single quotes when I'm working with identification numbers. Next, we are going to get the files. So the way that we're going to do that is we are going to access what we're going to call our source folder. So we're going to declare a variable of source folder. We're going to set it to driveapp.getFolder by ID. We're going to pass in a string there, and then we're going to get files. So we're going to go back to the place that our files are stored, the folder where our files are stored, and we're going to collect that identification number from the URL. We're going to go back to this section here where it says get folder by ID with either your single quotes or your double quotes. You're going to paste them in there. Now, as I mentioned, you can use single quotes or double quotes. It doesn't matter. All I would recommend is that you remain consistent with your methodology. So if you use single quotes here, use single quotes here. If you use double quotes, use double quotes. Just stay consistent. We are going to create an empty array to store the files for movement. So we're going to declare a variable of array files, and we are going to set it to an empty bracket. All of this is very similar to the last lesson that we did. Instead of manually typing values into our array, we are going to loop through our source folder and extract the IDs rather than hard code them. The benefit of this is that if there are new files added to the source folder, anytime this script runs, it will dynamically account for them. So we are going to use a while loop to move through the files. You know what? I'm going to say iterate through the files. So we're going to do while source folder dot has next open parentheses, open curly bracket, enter. Now we're going to create an iterable variable. So what happens when you iterate through files? So if you use get files, or if you're working in a spreadsheet and you use get sheets, what happens is this variable, in this case we called it source folder, is an iterable. Basically it has multiple values associated with the variable. So you need to loop through them in order to access each individual portion. So we're going to declare a variable called file, and we're going to set it to source folder dot next open parentheses. This is now going to allow us to see each file that exists in our source folder. So you can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to do logger.log. You don't have to do this. I just want you to be able to see what will happen once we call file. I'm going to hit save. If you do this, it is going to ask you to authorize permissions. So you are going to have to do this at some point if you don't do this now. The program is currently running, and we're going to be prompt with having to allow this script to access our Drive app. So we're going to review the permissions. We're going to sign into the account that we're using. We're going to go to advanced, go to whatever your project name is down there, and then you select allow. So you can see we now have this iterable variable here that is happening because of the while loop. So you can see we're getting file 3, file 2, and file 1. That is exactly what we want down here. So now what we need to do is push the file IDs into the empty array. So we don't want the file names because we are going to want to use a method that uses the file ID. So we're going to call the empty array, so array files dot, and then we're going to use push, and we're going to reference the file variable, and we're going to use a dot, and then you can see we have a bunch of options now, a bunch of methods, functions, whatever you want to call them. And we're going to say get ID. We're going to have an open parentheses. And what this is going to allow us to do now is we are going to access each of those iterables. So when I open up my run, or when I run it, what's going to happen is these file IDs are being pushed into the empty array. My apologies. When I hit run, I was hoping it will pull up our most recent execution. I should have selected execution log. My apologies. So what we're going to do so that you can see it is we're going to do logger.log, and we're going to call that array files variable, and we're going to run it again just so that you can see now instead of names, we're going to get these IDs, and we now have an array so that we can use a for loop like we did in our last video in order to push those files into our second destination. So we're going to use for loop to iterate through the files array and send to destination folder. So we're going to use for, and then I'm going to use the variable of I in array files, open curly bracket, hit enter. You're going to call drive app dot get file by ID, and then we're going to pass array files square bracket with whatever variable you use. So I used I, so we're using array files. That's here, square brackets, I. And then we're going to go to the right, and we are going to say move to, and then we're going to call that destination folder variable. Cool. So our script is done. Once we hit run, this should move the files from destination to destination number 2. If you did not run the script yet, when you hit run, you're going to have to authorize permissions. So feel free to pause the video and run it now so that you can, have those permissions, or you can just wait until the end, whatever you want to. I'm going to hit run. I'm going to have to authorize permissions. Sorry, I didn't realize that. So I'm going to go through the process again. I'm going to hit advanced, move to another file, allow, tap dancing music, our script completed. Let's go to destination number 2. Let's hit refresh. And you can see all 3 files are now in there. Let's go back to destination. Cool, now they're no longer in there. So to summarize, we learned how to move files from one Google Drive folder to another. You learned how to use empty arrays, while loops, and for loops. This is a video that is part of a larger series about using Google Apps Script with Google Drive. So if you're interested in learning more about this, please check out the playlist for more lessons to come. If you want to learn more about automating workflows in Google Drive, please check out my channel. I have a bunch of videos there. I always look forward to comments from you. I've got some really good suggestions for additional tutorials that I can add to this series. So, please reach out. If you have any questions, my email is in my About section. And I hope I'll see you in the next one.